Chapter 11. The Sawdust Trail. In the fall of 1950, evangelist B.B. Krim and his tent campaign came to Corpus Christi. Sawdust covered the floor, and we sat on rustic benches. During that campaign, the evangelist was killed in an accident, and my husband was called to finish the meetings. While Lester was preaching those days, the Holy Spirit began to move in my husband's heart in a powerful way. He recognized what was happening. Marie, I must yield to the leading of the Holy Spirit. But the conflict in his inner man waged. He loved his work at Second Baptist Church. The struggle continued for several months. I saw his body become weary from indecision. I counseled him to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. Finally, in April of 1951, he reached a decision. He preached his final message to the church and sang the song which was to be his theme song on the Sawdust Trail through the next 4 years as an evangelist and radio minister. I'll go where you want me to go, dear Lord. It brought tears to the eyes of the church family that day, but there came a victory for Lester. He answered his call into Macedonia. Isaiah 54:2 became the promise upon which he built his evangelistic ministry. Enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thine habitations. Spare not, lengthen thy cords, and strengthen thy stakes. As Lester told the congregation of his inward strivings, there was a stillness throughout the auditorium. At the invitation time, the power of the Lord was felt, and the people came to kneel at the altar. The 7 years at Second Baptist were a fruitful time, a time of seasoning, growth in wisdom, strengthening of convictions, and development of a more fervent desire to see lost souls saved. The heartaches and disappointments had been the refiner's fire that burned off the dross and left the gold. Evangelist Krim's tent was bought, and Lester prepared to go on the road. Later, when Mr. and Mrs. E. A. Goodman began working with him, a larger tent without poles was built, and vans were purchased to haul the canvas cathedral, chairs, platform, and equipment. Mr. W. D. York of Houston supplied a tractor and driver to pull the vans from meeting to meeting. In Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, wherever they were called, the work advanced by leaps and bounds, and Lester received more invitations than he could possibly accept. As the tent meetings continued, the radio ministry also grew. Brother Goodman handled the tent, the recordings of the services, the duplication of the tapes, and the mailings to the ever-growing list of stations across the country. Mrs. Goodman kept the radio logbook, and Francis Goodman Price managed the myriad of details connected with the Roloff evangelistic enterprises. My responsibility was to stay by the stuff, teach at the Park Avenue Christian Day School, and maintain our home in Corpus Christi. Every time Lester came home, he confided that he felt like an anchorless ship at sea with its motors dead. We were at another crossroads. Since he had been branded by the denominational leaders as controversial, he felt at loose ends. I have to plead guilty to being controversial, he said. The truth is controversial. After all, Paul was branded a pestilent fellow, a mover of sedition, and a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. John Wesley was branded and excluded on charges of being undignified, unorthodox, and sensational. Elijah was called the troublemaker in Israel. Micaiah was hated by the king on the grounds that he would not say anything good about him. Amos, the country boy, was condemned for his porcupine preaching by Amaziah, evidently the president of the ministerial alliance in his city. Lester needed a church home, a base from which to operate where there was a church family praying and supporting him with their love and concern. Faith works today, he said to 6 friends who shared his feelings. Faith never takes counsel with fear and is never a victim of circumstances. With that kind of faith, $2,500 earnest money was put down on 10 4/10 acres of land on South Alameda Street in Corpus Christi. God vindicated the decision on October 24, 1954, and the Alameda Baptist Church was organized. At 3 in the afternoon, 126 people came for church membership, and within 6 months there were 374 members. These people have the sweetest spirit and the greatest vision for missions and service of any church we've ever served, he told his radio audience. We have fewer wires strung, but God has given us of His Spirit. We were meeting under the big gospel tent. We just want to win the lost for Christ, he emphasized. The biggest step of faith occurred when the church took over the Good Samaritan Rescue Mission in Corpus Christi, assuming $1,500 worth of back debts. It was obvious that Lester's heart was overflowing as he ministered to these lost sheep, feeding them and furnishing them a place to sleep. The revival services continued, with 4 major tent campaigns in various parts of the country each year, plus other gospel rallies, Bible conferences, and revivals. It is our policy under God's leadership to go anywhere He leads, and while there to seek to be a blessing to the local church, to win the lost, and to undergird the pastor's hands in his ministry. The first issue of the publication, to be entitled Faith Enterprise, came out in May 1955. Romans 1:17 and Galatians 3:11 tells us that the just shall live by faith, Lester wrote. The Bible doesn't say they could live or ought to live, but they shall live by faith. There are only 2 ways to live. One is by faith, the other by sight. Sight is the only way the natural man can live. But the just man shall live by faith, therefore giving evidence of his trust and confidence in God, and thereby giving God an opportunity to unleash His power and make bare His mighty arm. The Faith Enterprise became the way we could keep our radio listeners informed concerning the radio and revival schedules, the work of the church in Corpus Christi, the rescue mission, the day school, and any other reports and needs that arose. When faith falters, we fail, he wrote. Faith puts us into the realm of righteousness. Faith does the unusual, but faith is also practical. Jesus would still say, if He came back to this earth today, "Be it done unto you according to your faith." A man can live no better than by his faith in God.